Hello, guys. By the end of this conversation, you'll understand the EV dynamics in Rwanda, why Kabisa, an EV company, chose Chinese EVs, and if the company plans to manufacture or locally assemble any of these EVs. In addition, you'll know how Kabisa is increasing access to green, safe, and efficient means of transport by selling and renting vehicles like the Wuling Mini EV, Geely Geometry E, and BYD Song Plus, among others. To break it all down for us is Marumbo Sichinga. He is the head of sales and business development at Kabisa. So welcome, Sichinga, and probably what we can do is start by you telling us about this Chinese tech on the vehicles. Why these and why now?
First and foremost, thank you so much for having me on your show. And to your question, why Chinese tech? We're currently in Rwanda, and Rwanda is really positioning itself as a very ambitious country that's trying to do things that are moving forward in the region. And one of those things that we're trying to do here in Rwanda is really to push on EV adoption. Rwanda is a very small country, so access to power is currently growing. So about 70% of Rwanda is actually electrified, but it also has a very hilly terrain. It's also a landlocked country, which makes access to fuel quite expensive. But also with where we are, it's sort of like a basin. So we have a lot of pollution that comes in from other countries that sort of lands in Kigali. And so the air quality here, due to other factors, isn't always as great. And then couple that with old vehicles that have been around for 10, 12 plus years and burning of that fuel. There's a lot of factors that really contribute in EV adoption here in Rwanda. And then also couple that with the cost that it takes to run ICE vehicles. And so there's a lot of push from government and statutory bodies for there to be EV adoption in Rwanda. And this makes it quite a wonderful environment for businesses like ourselves that want to support the EV ecosystem. And now, more pertinent to your question, why Chinese? Well, China has been building EV vehicles for the past 30 years. And so right now, they're the current world leaders in the production of electric vehicles. The technology seems to be far ahead from other competitors that we've seen. And then this allows us to have affordable vehicles for our markets that can be supported by Chinese manufacturers in this region. And so I think that's why we mainly go for Chinese brands. Right now, BYD, which is one of the leading EV vehicles, you can get an EV for 10,000 US dollars brand new, and that vehicle will be able to save you on cost, contribute positively to the environment, and you can use it almost anywhere in the world. So these factors, amongst many others, are why we choose Chinese brands to work with.
Nice. And I may bring you back to vehicle ownership because in East Africa, we know that it's a very heavily second-hand market. And so when you speak about the cost, interestingly, it's the same cost that, for instance, in Kenya, you will get
Yeah,
an 8-year-old vehicle, but now you're
yeah.
getting a new Chinese EV that has not been used anywhere else, and you're the first driver. Well, apart from whoever
Yeah.
got it from the garage. So really, it does make a lot of sense when you speak about, the cost. And
Yeah.
when you look at the space now and where we are heading to,
Yeah.
and are the minds shifting in terms of, I want a certain brand that is 8 years old because, hey, it's mainstream, or
Yeah.
there's a new Chinese EV here and I want this because it makes sense that I make savings and, maintenance is reduced and things like that.
There's still a bit of work to be done in that front to educate the markets. I think so. I'll take a step back. One of the things that China did very well when they were going through the industrial age is that they said they were just going to build things
Hmm.
and learn over time. So in the beginning, if you think like 10, 15 years ago, China was making a lot of products, but they weren't great, but they were making them. And over time, they've improved them. So before, when you said, oh, this is from China, what you meant was it's like cheap and will break easily because they were still developing their capacity to develop these products. But now, if you say this product is from China, you're guaranteed that it does have quality and it will last. But because of that beginning, that sort of shift in market is still gradually happening. So, for example, I spoke about BYD. BYD is the leading brand when it comes to EVs globally. But if I say BYD or if I say Tesla, more people will know Tesla. And then Tesla is, because it's an American brand, it's very well advertised and marketed, automatically people think quality. When in essence, BYDs are also just as good quality and are very much competing with Tesla brands and actually outselling them. And so I think we have the opportunity to really educate the market that these goods are of quality and are affordable. But again, to your point, right? Consumers like myself included, right? Like it took a bit of convincing because, like you're saying, $10,000. If I spend $10,000 to buy a brand new Chinese vehicle that nobody knows, or I could buy myself a Toyota Hilux and people know, and automatically they can assume where I am in the social ladder, all of that really plays into it. And so, yes, there's a bit of pushback in that sense, but for practical use and the fact that there's a new vehicles that we can run and use, I think EVs are going to take over the market, in my opinion.
In Rwanda, you have to be competing against the likes of Kia, Hyundai, and Volkswagen. What would
Yeah.
you say is your strategic move or approach into Rwanda's EV market? And you have mentioned that there has to be a huge mind shift
Yeah.
when you consider this as competition.
I think there's several factors there, right? Like you said, we are a second-hand market, especially like East African Southern region, particularly also because of the cost of ownership. And so because of that, it's not that we always want to buy second-hand cars. It's just that we usually can't afford a brand new car. And so our goal is to make it such that the cost of ownership of a brand new EV should be less than the cost of ownership of a second-hand ICE vehicle. And so part of the problem there is we're also in an economy where we live hand to mouth. And usually there's no financing in between. So people will usually save up to own a car. So I'll save up for a year, have my 5, 6 million, 7 million Rwandan francs, etc., and then I can be able to purchase. And usually we pay cash up front. Whilst in other economies, you can walk into a dealer lot today and you're paying $500 a month and you can walk away with a new car. After 2 years, you can swap that car over, get another payment plan. And so our biggest goal right now is to really show the benefits and the savings that come with these new electric vehicles and try to bridge the financing between that cost gap. So for example, if you have a secondhand, I want to mention a brand, let's say a secondhand vehicle about 8 years old, it might cost you, let's say $700 to run and maintain every month for your fuel and maintenance cost. Whilst if you have a new EV, this would cost you about $150 per month. And so there's a saving in between there of about $550 every month just by switching your vehicle over from ICE to EV. Now, the question then is, I already own this ICE vehicle. How do I bridge the gap into owning this EV? But if you're already spending $550 every month, and I come to you and they say, well, for an additional $100, it starts to become a bit interesting. And so we want to figure out how we can be able to do that and make it really interesting and easy for people to own electric vehicles and switch over from other brands.
Interestingly, in Kenya, the experience I've had is a guy who actually an Uber driver. So what he did was he swapped his ICE vehicle, sold it off, and then acquired an EV, a Chinese EV, Aneta,
Yeah.
and the premiums that he's supposed to pay monthly are the savings he makes on fuel.
Yes.
So it does make sense. So for you, our fans, you can get that story. It's on our page, and I know we are continuing creating this. But Marumbo, what are the most popular EVs that you are selling, and what is the selling point of this?
There's sort of two market segments that we look at. There's the sort of commercial market segment and personal vehicle owners. And so commercial side, we're really looking at industrial vehicles, so vans and light duty trucks. And we have a brand that we're partnered with called Horizon Geely that we work with. And for that, it really just makes sense because they're not really focused on how the car looks. They just focused on how it works and how much it saves them. And so like even to your story about the Uber driver, they're seeing similar savings on the commercial side where like the premium that they have to pay is actually what they would have been spending either way in their books on fuel. But then at the end of this 3 or 4 year period, they own this vehicle and they can continue to run it. And for businesses, that cash flow really makes sense for them. They're also not purchasing this car outright. They can use bank loans, purchase the vehicle, use that cash flow to run it. And then on the passenger segment, which becomes a bit more interesting because now you're appealing to people's taste and how they feel, how the car looks, how it makes them look how other people think of them when they see them. But on that front, we're really working with BYD, and at least it's a brand that when people hear it, they know what it is. They can sort of have a trust that this is quality, and these are the leaders in the market, maybe next to brands like Tesla. And if you're really into EVs, like other brands that are in China, like Chery or Dongfeng. And so, yeah, we really focus on the BYD, but also because we know that there is enough of them in the market so that we can be able to support with after sales. And that's also a big thing. Yeah, because it's like, this is new technology. If I'm switching over, how does this work?
All right.
So, yeah.
All right. And then when you talk about after sales service, you are the ones who are acquiring the BYDs from China. They are shipped to you. How is that relationship between you and BYD as a supplier in terms of turnaround time and things like that?
It's a two-sided coin. The beautiful thing about EVs is that they have less moving parts, which means your maintenance costs are generally low, because in essence, an EV is just a battery and an electric motor drivetrain. And so a lot of the damage that you see is like bodywork, crashes and scratches here. So you've got your lights, bodywork that needs to be fixed, and some sensors. And so for this fast moving goods, we try to stock them in country so that we're able to support as a need be. For battery, we're trying to build up the capacity for this. So in the next year or so, we want to be able to replace cells, be able to replace even the full battery itself in a vehicle. But ideally, cell balancing and cell replacement are the things that we're looking at to be able to support. And then we're also working with what we're calling telemechanics. And so this allows our local engineers to be able to talk to our Chinese counterpart engineers and be able to diagnose and solve problems in real time. And so we're building out this capacity, and hopefully we'll be able to support in Rwanda and in the region in the coming year or so.
That's interesting because I've had conversations regarding how Africans can benefit from the EV value chain. And when you mentioned that you're going to start a service whereby you will be fixing the batteries, the cells and things like that, I see an aspect of job creation in that. How can we benefit by creating this kind of levels within the value chain whereby we don't just become consumers? Because when we import fully built units, all of our dollars are going to China. And the only benefit that comes to our governments is the taxation, which is actually not even the value of those vehicles.
I have sort of a two-sided answer, like slightly more philosophical and slightly more practical. I think the problem of making Africa interconnected and working together is a bigger problem than one company, one person can solve. But I think our problem is that we're not interconnected enough to be able to solve problems like this. And so if you look at, let's say, Rwanda as a market, about 19, 20 million people, GDP less than 1,000 a day average, which then limits your total market size to around, if you're lucky, maybe 200,000 people that can buy brand new cars every year. If you look at the East region together as a group, then that market size starts to grow. If you look at SADC plus the Eastern region, then that market size to grow. But it's cheaper for me to fly return to Paris than it is for me to fly from Kigali to Entebbe. Entebbe is a 45-minute flight, but it's cheaper for me to fly to Paris return than to just fly one way into Entebbe, which makes doing business very hard. It's very hard to move goods from Mombasa or Dar es Salaam into Kigali, terrain, all the tax imports that happen within that region. And so all these things combined make it really hard for us to do business with each other. But it also limits the size of our market. Shanghai alone could be a bigger market than Rwanda. And then you think about how big China is. By the time they make an investment for having building plants, battery replacement, assembly of vehicles, the market size starts to make sense. And so if you're putting a couple $1 billion into that market size, it starts to make sense. While if you're just putting it into Rwanda and it's very hard for me to move it across, it makes it very hard for me to also want to make that investment. And so I think we need to solve how we're connected to each other and how we do business with each other, because it limits the market size and how well people can be able to invest to make this actually profitable. But with that being said, I think there are opportunities to really create jobs for people in the region, especially in the space, to manufacture. Because as you said, we own the raw materials, but we also don't have the technology and the capacity to really build it out for the nations that we serve. And we also lose a lot of money from buying fuel. A lot of forex is lost from having to purchase this fuel to bring it into our countries, when we also have other means of generating power that EVs can work with. And so a lot of the power that's in Rwanda is renewable. So it's hydro, geothermal, depending on who you ask, they might tell you if it's renewable or not. But there's a lot of hydropower and there's some solar power as well. And the region has a lot of potential in using renewable energy to also power electric vehicles for productive use. And so there's a lot of opportunity there, I think. But I think we need to fix this market issue first. And then it makes it more attractive for investors to really put money into the things we're trying to grow.
The Rwandese government has removed taxation on importing EVs. Has this benefited you and how? And does the reduced taxation trickle down to your buyer?
The only way EVs become competitive in this region is if there's no tax paid on them. Simple as that. If there's taxation on these brand new cars, then the price shifts up so high that they don't become competitive. But in Rwanda, in some instances, EVs are cheaper brand new than buying even a secondhand car. And so, especially also with the market that's very secondhand car based, that cost factor is really, really important. And so, even if the difference is an extra 2 to 3 million, it starts to become more attractive to have this brand new car than have a secondhand ICE vehicle. And so, yes, to put it bluntly, I think without these tax incentives, it makes it very hard for EVs to compete in this region because they're brand new cars and we're also having to import them from China. But because we do have these tax incentives, then it becomes interesting for people to purchase these cars, but also benefit from the day-to-day savings that come with owning such a vehicle. And so if the whole region had this policy, then we would see a lot of growth and uptake. And it would allow us also to really interconnect these markets because I think there's a huge potential in connecting Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, and Tanzania to allow and process trade between the two nations. Well, sorry, between the region.
All right. Back in China, the Chinese companies are very competitive. You said you have Geely, we have BYD, we have Xiaomi, we have all of this are competing for a market. Because I think China is concentrated somehow. They are looking for expansion outside. And so they are competing, meaning there are those who will sell cheaply so that they can get some headway into this market before, they increase the pricing. But for you at Kabisa, how are you leveraging this competition so that you get the best from the Chinese market, if it is BYD, if it is Geely, in terms of quality, in terms of pricing? Because at the end of the day, quality and price will be the king.
That's very true. Quality and price will truly be king in this market. And at the same time, we also don't want to be proponents of just making Africa a dumping ground of old batteries. Where the cells and these bodies come to just die. And so really figuring out which brands sort of make sense, which brands are offering support, which brands will be around long enough to support once we start to see some issues with these vehicles is really key for us. Another is what's the critical mass point for choosing a brand so that you can always get parts, you can always get replacement cells, you can always get support. And also what's the vision of this company decision, but also like we said, price is very important. A $3,000 difference in price can really shift the market here because, like I said, we live very much hand to mouth and day to day. And so we need to really put all these factors into place. So we're trying to offer quality at the best price point, but also make sure that we can have support for these vehicles. And so, yeah, it's a bit tricky because also slightly new technology, but I think it's been happening over time. And so we can see the trends and see where things are going. And then really look for the companies to back.
We can't talk about electric vehicles in African countries, least of all Rwanda and Kenya, where I am, and forget or fail to discuss electricity and charging infrastructure. First of all, electricity is really expensive, this part of Africa and the world. And then charging infrastructure is mainly in major urban towns. But I know Kabisa has a number of charging stations spread out across Rwanda. How are you expanding these charging systems? And is the government contributing? Because unless there is some kind of a give and take, or does the government just exempt you on taxes and then everything else you have to take care of?
The beautiful thing about Rwanda is that it's, like I said, very forward thinking. And so they're trying to really figure out ways they can support the industry. And so one of the things they've done is there's a special incentive in terms of how much power you pay if you have an EV. So you can apply to get a reduced tariff for your EV chargers. And then they had also had a fund that allows for you to expand your charging network by being able to apply for this fund to purchase transformers that go to the grid when you're looking to install higher power chargers. And so sort of this helps. And they already have a plan around electrifying the whole nation. So what EV allows them to do is this excess power that they might be able to generate to find a good use for it. So in most countries, it's not that the electricity isn't there. There's just not enough productive use for it. And so in some places, the investment in like large hydro plants and transmission lines doesn't make sense because the people that are going to use it might not be able to afford to pay for it because it's not productive use. And so EVs become interesting in that regard because this energy will be consumed and used by these vehicles, but it'll also be paid for. So imagine if we convert 10,000 18-ton trucks from gas to electricity. Now you have a lot of power that needs to be generated and used to power them. And so there is case in which we can be able to use it. But in terms of the whole region, like you said, yes, power is slightly expensive, but it's still cheaper than fuel. And so the rough estimates around savings, even in places where electricity is most expensive, is still around 50% less cost when you switch over to EV than if we're still using fuel. And so that still makes it quite attractive because that power can be generated in country. Again, the country is not using its forex reserves to purchase fuel to burn in the country. And we're just really upgrading the power that we have in country and having effective use for it. And then this excess that's being paid for, the rest of it can be used for citizens to be able to power their houses. And this can really grow their industries. So all that to say that the ripple effect of actually using EVs on the industry won't always be seen directly, because if I can save money on how much it takes me to travel from one place to another, then I have a bit more excess money to be able to use to purchase things, which then boost the economy. And then the economy of the country is also not using its forex reserves to purchase fuel. All of that really trickles down on a macroeconomics level that might not be always directly associated to the direct thing that we're doing now with EVs. But all these little savings across really have a macro impact on the economy. And so our hope is that that will really galvanize this EV adoption, even from a government point of view.
And apart from the charging infrastructure, what are the other hindrances that you are seeing or experiencing?
So yeah, charging infrastructure is high on that list because of things like range anxiety, but also the time it takes for cars to charge. Another is financing, to not have you can have the cash flow, but not all of the money to be able to purchase this vehicle and to be able to use them. Another is really just to change the mindset around what EVs are, how they perform, especially because a lot of them are also Chinese brands. And so this requires a lot of education from the market. And then the fourth thing would be around confidence and support, that if something happens to this vehicle, they will have the technical expertise to be able to be supported, but also across the country. So somebody says, look, if I have a Toyota, people know everywhere I go, people know how to handle them. If I have a breakdown in this far away from the city, I'm not sure if there'll be a mechanic that knows EVs to be able to support. And so building out this capacity will take some time, but I think as the demand grows, then the need for this capacity building will be there. And so we'll be able to grow it out.
That makes a lot of sense. And I know we mentioned a bit, or you touched a bit earlier on benefiting from the EV value chain, and you have mentioned batteries. How is the situation in Rwanda? Or do you have to import these vehicles forever? Are there plans to manufacture, assemble this vehicle?
This is my opinion. For markets like Kenya and Zimbabwe, it makes more sense to have local assembly and local production. For Zimbabwe, because the raw materials are readily available there, and there's a lot of youth unemployment, which means that there's a lot of cheap labor to build out the local materials. Same thing in Kenya, where you have a large population of youth that also need jobs. And the market size is big enough, at least, to have a hefty investment, whereas these EVs are built out that they can be locally sold. For a country as small as Rwanda, the need for local assembly isn't there yet, unless we were providing these vehicles for the whole Eastern market. And so the cost of having an assembly line or a manufacturing plant done, the amount of money that it will cost you to set it up, have it running, import materials, build out these EVs, and then start to sell them is not at a place where the demand is justifiable to do this. It's actually cheaper just to import a fully built vehicle that doesn't have any tax on it and sell it than it is to make an investment to build out this plant.
Mm.
But with that being said, the future would be that we should have local assemblies as close as possible to where the raw materials are, because that lowers your cost. It also provides these jobs, but the demand for the vehicles needs to be there. China can afford to do it because they have a large enough internal market, but also they have managed to fulfill that market and are looking to export.
Mm.
And I think we should have the same sort of view that we need to first figure out how do we supply to our local markets and then also export outside. Because if somebody's bringing, let's say, $2 billion to build a plant and they can only sell 100 cars a year, the investment and the return on investment doesn't make sense. You'd rather just import them. And so, yeah, balancing that out. And again, as you said, the cost of electricity right now, so for you to build out this plant and to run it, you might find that your cars will probably be more expensive to build in Africa right now than it is to import them from China.
Right.
So we need to fix those things around. We need to fix that power generation, make it cheap enough to have local industries. We are close to the materials. How do we refine the materials locally? And then how do we create that demand to justify this investment and to have a market ready for it?
That sounds like Africa has to unite. Regardless, they have to work together. Like, we cannot be talking about an East African community whereby we still have these borders. We have to agree,
Yeah.
like Kenya be manufacturing this aspect of these EVs, Uganda do this, Rwanda do that, and then we open these borders.
And also, like you're saying, we all don't have to supply the same things. But I mean, there are many examples that people give, right? If I'm only selling kitenges in Mombasa, my market is limited. You open these borders up, even the local kitenge manufacturer in Mombasa has a larger population of people that they can reach. And the person that's making flour in Uganda also has another market that they can reach. And so there's a lot of intertrade that needs to happen. And we all don't need to be doing the same things, but if we're opening markets to each other, then that will have a bigger impact. That synergy will have more return than just the direct trade that we have right now.
Absolutely. You are in Rwanda. Are there plans of expanding outside of Rwanda into the region, into the continent?
End of this first quarter, we hope to be in Nairobi, Kenya, exploring the market there. And we're also dabbling and looking at Kampala in Uganda to see how we can truly connect these markets. One of our big goals is to have an EV highway that goes all the way from Mombasa through Nairobi, Nakuru, Kisumu, Jinja, you go down into Kampala all the way to Kigali. And then a similar route also that goes from Kigali all the way to Dar es Salaam. And so if we can connect these markets, I think there's a very big opportunity in lowering cost of goods and also the cost of transporting people. And I think the ripple effects of these would be good. So yeah, we're thinking through how can we build an EV highway that goes from the coast all the way into Kigali. So we recently drove up an electric pickup from Kigali to Nairobi, and we were charging along the way. So it's a very feasible thing to be able to do, to be able to drive your EV from Kigali all the way to Nairobi and back. And I think if we can do that with an EV, we can be able to start to connect light-duty trucks, vans, 18-ton trucks that are moving goods. We also have companies like Basigo that move people. And so if we can lower the cost of somebody being able to move from location to location, these goods, I think the ripple effect of this would be really good on these economies. So yeah, we're really excited about what the future holds for EVs and for us as Kabisa as a company.
Nice. When I buy Chinese EV from Kabisa and I need maintenance, I need whatever issue sorted for my car, do I have to bring it back to you, or are there like spaces across the country where we can take our EVs to be taken care of?
So for now, if you purchase it from us, we recommend that you bring it back to us as part of your warranty agreement so we can be able to look at it. But we are working with partner organizations like GIZ to really build out this capacity so that we can have satellite sort of garages that handle these maintenance issues. And there are a few that are coming up that are doing hybrids and also fully electric vehicles. And so the goal is to be able to sort of certify this process and really have people that are certified and have been trained working on them. But again, it's also very much a demand and supply thing. So as we grow the demand, the need for these satellite garages that can really work on these EVs will start to grow. And also, we won't have the capacity to do it ourselves. And so, our goal as Kabisa is really to be an ecosystem player. And so, by that is if we supply the vehicles, as we build out the charging infrastructure, which is open to all vehicles, to also support in the maintenance by providing this trainings and support around how others can really benefit. Look, I think for us, seeing EVs on the road is a win. And if they can be on the roads, properly maintained, and in some sort of way we had some sort of support in this process, we're really happy with that. We don't have to be the direct beneficiaries from it. And so, yeah, and the hope is that this will continue to grow and we can start to see more interest even in the maintenance side.
That is Marumbo Sichinga. He's in sales at Kabisa EV. It's a Rwandese EV company that is dealing in or with Chinese EV vehicles across all the transport sectors. I like saying that we cannot exhaust the resources because there is enough for everyone, but not enough for everyone's greed. So thank you so much, Marumbo. And for you, we are grateful that you're always spending time with us, enjoying our content. Please like, share, and subscribe, because these conversations can only be interesting when there are more. And just like meals, they become more interesting when there are conversations around those meals. So please do not forget China Global South across all social media platforms. And also we publish on the website, chinaglobalsouth.com. You will find all the content that we produce on China in the Global South and all the relationships and partnerships that China is engaged in. My name is Hakeenah, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.